say less. I'm back in that bag again. Yeah, yeah. Oh, say less. I'm back in that. Yeah. What you doing? Yeah, yeah. I'm back in that. Hey, where you going? Hey.
Love that new intro. And that's not the second time I've watched it. I've watched it several times because I went back and watched the VOD. Hey, everybody, welcome to the SPL Waiting Room, your one-stop shop for all things SMITEPro League, where today we're going to be talking about what happened last week. And I guess encompassed in that is also stuff that has happened the week before, but a lot of stuff that has changed the future. And then some of the matches that are coming up this week, because there's a lot of them that are really, really good. And Trelli.
Can you believe that we got a whole room just for waiting? I'm sorry.
That's what he was cooking up.
So chat,
that's what he's cooking up.
It works on so many levels because you waited for it.
Trelli, like five minutes ago, I think now, looked up and went.
I started giggling.
He started laughing. He went, actually, wait. I'm going to tell you after the show starts.
And
that's like for waiting.
They waited for it.
Waited like 4 or 5 minutes for that joke.
Nice. And it's the waiting.
Now Gore's off his.
I'm not even mad. I'm just disappointed.
I'm not even mad. I'm just disappointed. I'm not off my game now. I'm just thinking about, like, you're right. That worked on so many layers.
Yep.
Because we're waiting for SBL. You made us wait for the joke. They're waiting for us to get to the damn point. Like, it's everybody's waiting for something.
Man.
Bingo.
But the things that happened this last week, there's one that we're going to dive into, and it's 2 segments from now. But for this next segment, that's just looking at last week. I think we even had some graphics made for us.
Whoa.
Very specifically and very kindly. To just look at some of what the players were doing overall and how their week went. So some of the player spotlights. Most first bloods going over to Venenu. Most solo kills going over to Oath. Multi-kills to Sheento. Sheento, by the way, I tweeted this out. Sheento has 23 more kills than anybody else in the league right now.
Sheento's going crazy.
He's got 82.
I know K's going crazy.
He's 82.
No, he's getting crazied.
He's getting crazied.
No, look at that. That's crazy.
That's crazy.
But I can't believe Genetics made like a full montage of him just soloing fine. Okay. I can't believe it, actually, and it was good.
I also have to be impressed by Sot because stealing in the SBL in general is hard.
Yep.
And to steal twice in 1 week is very, 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 very impressive on his part. Mm-hmm. But Sheento's kind of nuts. So if you think about that, 10 doubles is 20 kills, and 2 triples is 6 kills. So that's 20, like, in just that alone, not including any singles that he may have had. That's 26 that he's been able to put.
I'm wondering if those triples do count up to the doubles, though. Like if that's 3 exclusive triples alongside the 10 doubles, or if that's 10 doubles and then the 2 triples that extend to be on there. So at bare minimum, he got 22 kills just this week, which is a wild number to think of.
A lot of kills.
Yep.
He's at 82, 18 more, and that dude's going to hit 100. And the next highest was 59.
Wow. And who is that?
I think, I want to say it was Venenu. And it was someone on the Ravens.
That does make sense.
And then right after that was Adapting.
Okay.
So that's what was.
Leviathans doing a whole lot of killing and also getting soloed.
And getting soloed. Leviathans are getting the job done, and they're going to be a big portion of some of the next topic. But that's not the only things to look at. We also had things like the earliest objective. First off, First Bloods. That early one for the Kings, I believe, was against the Gladiators. It was me and Inbound. First Fire Giant, like 1530. Like, we've been getting some really early FGs. I feel like in these last weeks, as well as first Gold Fury Leviathans were just kind of feeling themselves. I feel like the Warriors set a fast pace, though, and that was a very fast game as a whole.
I'm trying to remember if that was the Warriors game or if that was a different one for the Leviathans, because I think they also played the Hounds this week or last week. I don't remember if that was their Hound set or if that was their Warriors
I feel like
set.
that's the one where they killed 4 Warriors on left. And like that's the one where they got up like 10,000 gold and then threw the hell out of that lead 3 minutes later.
I do think the Gold Fury. I think the Gold Fury was the Hounds. I think I vividly remember being with Mifflin when that one happened. Which 524 is also an insane time, because that's It spawns at 5. They said, cool, we're gonna push someone out at 5 minutes and then go for Fury.
Most of the time, Gold Fury is maybe not as strict to this, but like the fastest Fire Giant's like 10 minutes 30 seconds, and it's because it took 30 seconds at 10 minutes to kill it, because you got to get it when it spawns, and that's the best you could do. I'm really impressed with the KDAs though, right? Haddock's being up there. It makes sense because Haddock is real good, but like Hardcore, well, actually he's also real good, and Twig as well, who had a like crazy Lancelot game, Trelli.
Yep.
He just like, I feel like his numbers, like normally you'd see Twig in a week where it's like, okay, he went like 10 and 8. And like that's a good Twig week because he has 40 assists or something.
Right.
Those 23 kills, like 15 of them were just on that Lancelot game. That was a pretty good week for him.
Yep, and it's always a pleasure getting to talk to him afterwards, right? I think the interview said, these are some sets we are supposed to win, right? It doesn't show too much about the Camelot Kings just yet. I want to be able to see Twig put up those numbers, this week. That's the kind of thing that I think they're always thinking about as well. Is this the iteration of the Camelot Kings that can beat anyone, or are we just, beating teams that everyone knows we should beat? So very humble and also just real, because that's something that you should be thinking about at this point. We are very much in the road to Worlds, so just a great mindset, and also great KDA to end off the week.
Yeah, and we will talk every now and then about like KDA players. Twig's not one of those guys. No. He's never been on that list. But it's always nice that when you're not a KDA player and you get a good KDA, you got to feel pretty good about it. But yeah, week 2, it was really fun. And from what you can see, based on, when you look at player spotlights, as well as all of this. Oh, yeah, I have to make sure that the numbers that we pulled, while it was all last week, one of the things we were looking at were a lot of Blues Ultras graphics as well, and bringing those down. So shout outs to Blues Ultra. And I've actually been tweeting that out to a lot of people. Like, I even had someone like 20 minutes ago message me, hey, I want to do like some data manipulation. Do you have a place where I can like find SPL stats and things like that? And I'm like, go to Blues Ultra spreadsheet, click on the tables. It's got more numbers than you'll know what to do with. Because it's got more numbers than I know what to do with, and I like working with them.
This is the numbers guy.
And so it's there's a lot going on there. So just at Blues Ultra, that's on Reddit, that's on Twitter, that's on Instagram, that's probably on other social media platforms that I'm unaware of as of yet, and maybe TBD. Like Blue Sky, Threads, there's some others.
Yeah.
Twitter and the inevitable dumpster fire
MySpace makes a comeback.
Yeah. Blues Ultra, he's going to be in my top 8.
Yeah.
That's high praise.
That's high praise, man.
Gonna adjust your profile background to just be a Blues Ultras graphic.
Yeah. That would be real high praise. And you know what? When it loads, it'll be Blues Ultra's theme song, which I don't know what it is, but I'll let them choose.
I think you just go on YouTube and you just type in Blues Ultra in the search bar and just see what pops up.
I feel like you'd get like a My Hero Academia.
I was thinking of like a Blues Brothers song. We were on completely different like a mindset.
You went Blues,
and then I went
Ultra.
And then I was thinking like Blue Stali, which is like a metal style, not like a metal. They're like a electronic rock style band.
Yeah.
Or Blue Stahili, I think is what it is.
I'm Blue Dabba Dee Dabba Die. That's what maybe. That's where we're going. The things that we didn't touch on, though, and were hinted at by a lot of those recaps, were the Leviathans looking real good.
Yep.
As you said, they played the Hounds, and they win that set. Maybe unsurprisingly, I think, to a lot of people coming into that. The other half of the conversation, though, was they came in and played up against the Warriors.
Yes.
And they won that set, which at least caught me off guard.
Me as well.
And I was very happily caught off guard by it. Because, we got to see, I think, actually one of the sickest plays from Panatom in a game they lost. And then really big throw from the Leviathans in a game they lost. But then other than that, they played some really damn clean Smite and made the Warriors, I don't want to say look bad, but definitely look like a chicken running around with his head cut off.
I would say they looked bad, and that's the thing.
Jelly's like, no.
It's because, in particular, and I never like to harsh on one player, because one player does not lose a matchup, but it seemed to me like Pagon was dealt with, right? Like, it is very rare that Pagon does not look dominant in lane, in his role, across the map. It really did seem like Pagon was kept on a leash that game. Like, he was not able to just rotate out like he likes to. He wasn't able to just pop off in team fights. If anything, it seemed like he was forced to go in when he didn't want to, and that does not fit the Oni Warriors play style at all. And because of that, it just seemed like the Leviathans looked so much better. You know what I mean? Like, once you're able to just stop some of the top damage dealers on the Oni Warriors, it really does put them in a bit of a bad situation.
Yeah, I tend to agree that was probably, and I think even Biggie said it during our recap sit down that we had. Make sure to go check out the SPL daily recaps that now happen every single week. He said that was for sure Pagon's worst performance that he has had probably all season long. It might even be his entire career that he has had, but that was a set that Pagon did not really get to play. I think his best performing game was like a 3-1 or something like that in like game 1 or 2. And then he barely breaks even in game 2, and then he goes, I think it's 0-6, and then like 2-7 after that.
2-6.
It was
2-7. I remember.
It was a very strange set to see Pagon handled so easily. I guess is the best way to put it. And again, you can't put everything on one, but like when one of the star players, when you know the I guess not technically a rookie anymore for Pagon, but essentially your rookie player comes in. And who's up until this point, even whenever he was on, matchups that didn't seem favorable to him, when he's going against world champions, MVPs, he always looks good. There's never been a time where Pagon has looked bad. That was the first time we have legitimately see Pagon bleed that extensively. Because sometimes he'll have one bad game, he went like 1-3 or 1-4. To see him go like 0-6 and 2-7 on gods that he has been dominating with since he started playing,
and they prioritized his picks too,
and especially as you say, gods that they're top picking, Set, Pele, those are ones that team is going for immediately, and to have that level of performance on them after that set, maybe it was just a bad day for him, but that was just not a great look overall for that team. The only Warriors just kind of fell asleep a little bit at the wheel maybe that day, but now I guess no longer having to kind of hold that, okay, yeah, we can go for our new record again, because now I think their long win streak record can't extend to the extent that it did before. Now I guess a couple other teams have the ability to do so. But yeah, not a great look from the Warriors. I think it just comes down to the Leviathans really playing up to the thing.
Yep.
And I think for Leviathans, the players and the fans, this is a set that they really needed to see, because sure, I mean, you get wins against the Hounds. So the Hounds are kind of struggling right now. They're not really looking like a full team. Being able to take down what was essentially considered the best team, if not one of the best teams in the league, as cleanly as they did, is a great look for the Leviathans. It also, jokingly, I think it was a post game with Wrong U.S. and how's it feel? Going into your next matchup, it says, well, we only need one more win, and then we're just as good as we did last phase, and then from there we're good. But I don't think they're going to stop at just 3. I think this Leviathan team easily has the potential to go 9-1, 8-2 to kind of end out this phase.
I've been pulling it out a lot, but Panda Cats, guys, I'm not a 6th place player. And I think we got to see a lot of that in this last week. Like, he looked really good in that set. I think adapting, it was a return to form. Like the week before, we saw there was a moment against, I think it was Baskin on Ama, where two cycles of abilities just did not connect because Baskin looked so good. Sheento, who always usually looks good, also looked really, really, really good in this one. So it feels like a good look for the Leviathans. And it makes things very interesting because Jmac, like you said, I think we were talking about it. It was they're the second team and the second loss for the Warriors this year, which is weird to say for any team.
Because we're in October.
Yeah, we're in October. It does ruin their opportunity to demolish their own win streak after setting a historic 15. So if another team can set it, but they did go on record, they were like, yeah, we're never going to be able to do that again. It's wild that we did it once, let alone trying to do it another time.
Those are insane expectations.
And we're lucky someone else did it, because honestly, if the Fairman hadn't lost in the finals, if some things had changed, and if you go watch the Jake documentary, if some of the behind the scenes stuff was way different, there's a chance that they would have won that event and then kept on going until now, and we'd be talking about 18, 19, 20.
I think we'd be at 21 before that loss would be what it's at, because it stopped at 15. 16 would have been finals, and then they got the 5 up until this point. So yeah, we would have been at 21, pushing 22 by that point.
But they're not.
But they're not anymore.
And that leads us to something you had kind of said, which is the general question: who's the best now? Is it still the Warriors?
No.
Or are we are we looking at the Leviathans? Are they the best? Is it the Kings, who are, I think, undefeated 6-0? Who's the best team in SMITE right now?
I can tell you who the best player is. You may not agree with me, but it's Baskin.
I think I can agree
Everybody
with
who's been
that.
watching since season 2 is just like, yeah.
I mean, there's a reason that Baskin was always called the best in the world, even when he wasn't like winning world championships or necessarily on like the best teams. Is that Baskin is just a damn good player at Smite. He is one of the best players to ever touch the game, and he has been around for such a long time. Even when he jumped down to the SEC and is playing off roll and mid, he still looked good. There's a reason that team was Baskin and the boys, because Baskin was a carry in that spot for himself.
Baskin, and then there was the boys.
And then there was the boys around him.
Where's Aquarius? Because he was on a team called Aquaman and the Waves, which still holds my record as favorite team name I've ever had to cast.
That's a good one.
But there was also Bloogie and the Woogies.
There was Bloogie and the Woogies. There was that team.
What we're learning is that Baskin's real good, and everybody else just tried to copy him. I can't remember. Aquaman and the Waves definitely came first because that was like season 3. But
I think it's also
Baskin and the boys,
because like Baskin isn't afraid to try out some extra like new stuff in the solo lane. Like nobody else is playing Opwash solo right now.
Nope.
And he's not like he's bringing out every game and just going absolutely insane. He's playing into counter matchups. He's playing it when he feels that it works out. And I think that's the strength of the Fairman team, and why at the moment I might put them at number 1, if not 2, maybe behind the Leviathans. Is that the Fairmen are a team that aren't afraid to experiment, but if they realize that their experiments are failing, it's not going well, they have a really strong fallback plan. They have gods in their roles and players who can play those gods to the highest level possible. Anytime that we see Hebo come back into the meta, I cross my fingers going, are we going to see another Legacy Paul game? Are we going to see the 9-1 Hebo pop out, the 14-0? Like, what are we going to see from him? Yeah. What Cyclone Spin going to pop out? What crazy shenanigans is Aurora cooking up in the support role? What in the world is Sino even thinking is in his realm of God pool at that time?
And why is it working?
Why is he... Oh, Sino.
He gets to play beside Baskin and Paul and...
Sino finally went back to the Assassins. That's awesome. And then he builds Soul Eater, full tank Pele, and I'm sitting here going, why is this working? Why is he doing more damage than everybody? It is insane what this team is capable of, and I think that's what makes them so strong, is the core of their team, and Cyclone, Aurora, and Paul, who have been together for, I think, going on 3 years now, minus the time that Cyclone got dropped at the part end of last year,
right,
and then was replaced by Stu, and now back with in there. But this core has been together for such a long time, and they've all played with each other to some extent before this season with the other 2 guys on these teams, and have worked out well for them. It's just such a great synergy, and I think trust, and even listening into their comms, I think that's where the big difference between the top teams and the bottom teams right now is those level of communications.
Oh my God.
You tune in. There's a reason we had a whole death segment just for those comms.
Let him die, which we heard. And then there was the Gladiators listen in that I got to do, where we went to it and it was dead silent.
Yeah.
I think we heard 3 calls and then it was just nothing for the rest of it. And that was like one of those, like, oh no, you guys can't shut down. And like, I think you had mentioned it on the desk after, like they got back to talking eventually, but it took a little bit to get there, and maybe a little more than you'd want to see. And so like comms, I have to agree with you. I think that Fairman just look great. I mean, even going back to one of the other daily recaps when we had Zapman, you should go watch it at youtube.com/presumably SMITEPro. Yeah, because Smite VOD's just games.
Yeah.
SMITEPro. Where he was just like, look, man, with Vin and like the new team, he's like, I tell Vin, I'll die for you. He's like, and before that, when I was playing with Paul for a world championship twice in a row, I'll die for you. And he's like, and so it's, you know what? If you can get Paul into a good spot, you're on a good team. And the Ferrymen can do that, but they also have 3 other guys they can rely on to do that. It's very similar to the conversation we were having about the Warriors, I think, in Phase 1. Very fun team to watch. But right now, Trelli, so Jmac said Ferrymen.
Yeah.
You said Baskin is best player.
I said Baskin, yeah.
Do you have a team that you're willing to put up
I guess encompasses the Ferryman, right? I think it's hard to deny that at the moment. I've been loving the Leviathans' rise to form. I think if the Leviathans played the Ferryman like now, like after they've gained this confidence as opposed to like earlier on, maybe it goes a little bit differently.
Yeah.
But at the moment, it's hard to deny the Ferrymen are playing at like peak performance at the moment. So
and here's where we're supposed to call Aurora and the Ferrymen a super team.
Okay.
Because I think what's it, Paul? He was complaining at one point, and rightly so, was that we no matter what team Aurora was on for like 5 years, 6 years straight, it would come out and be like, that's a super team right there. And it's just like Aurora Cyclone, who had been playing together forever, and then add other good players like in the league. It's a super team. And then they'd come in the first phase and like lose the first half. And then they'd end up winning eventually because it's an Aurora team. They're going to learn. But it was always just like, yeah, everyone always calls us a super team. And then we come in and lose a lot. And then they say say like, oh, what's up with the super team? Why are they doing so bad? And it's like, we're just learning, bro.
Cyclone Aurora is like
the game.
Cyclone Aurora as a combo is like the new gen Jeff and Barra, because like the old heads of Smite, we go Jeff and Barra, like that's the combo. If you're just now like recently, like the last 3-4 years getting into SPL, that's who that is for them. That is their Jeff and Barra is Cyclone Aurora, and they just work so well together.
Could have been Mike and Panda, but Panda had to go and retire for a little bit and then come back and play for a different team, huh?
But Panda's been looking real good too.
Panda has been looking real good.
And that's the other thing.
In 5 years, it's Panda and Wrong You. That's the new Jeff and Barra. It's the new Aurora and Cyclone.
And I think that's a big difference though, because Leviathans are not playing that version of Smite that we have seen from them at all. They used to never play through duo pressure. If you remember, they would leave Zap on an island and they would play anywhere else. Now, it seems like they're playing a lot out of duo lane. They're trying to look for pressure. They're trying to play through Panda, which it ends up working really well for them. So being able to make that switch up ended up, I think, just putting them into a different league in the sense of how they can play the map, which is really cool to watch.
So Ferryman, maybe slot in Leviathans.
Yeah.
And then TBD. Kings have only played, well, actually Fairman have also only played 2 sets, but I think like opponent wise, there's been discussion around it. And that actually brings us into this next week, because this week, I looked at the wrong camera. This week, you guys, right here, it's actually going to be really crazy. I think Sunday, admittedly, is one that's slightly weaker than the other 2 days, but Friday and Saturday, like, we have a match of the week. For those of you, here's the spoiler. It's Kings versus Leviathans, because that's going to be a pretty sick set. That being said, there are 4 matches that I wrote down. Normally, it's just, okay, let's talk about match of the week and then hit anything else that might be interesting. There were 4 that I was like, this is real good conversation, because holy smokes, there's so many good sets. And so going through them top to bottom, Leviathans and Fairman actually leave the conversation for just a little bit. And we'll jump into Onis and Kings, which I think is the first set tomorrow. Or if we're playing this right before, or if you're watching this later, it's the first set on Friday, October 6th. Onis, a team coming off of a loss that they haven't had to experience for a long time,
right?
And something that, who knows how it's going to affect them, right? You've got this new swap. What kind of things are going through their heads? How are they going to be playing? Granted, we just saw Panatom. He didn't seem to have any concerns in his mind. And then the Kings on the other side, who are, 6-0 right now in terms of maps. They came in 3-0 the Ravens. They came in then 3-0 the Glads. But they've only had the 2 sets so far, so it's kind of a ramp up for them as compared to a team like the Leviathans, who's played 4 already. It's also important for the in-region, right? Because Kings, I think, now 2-0. Onis now 2-1. And so suddenly this conversation is getting a little, I'm not going to call it shaky, but it's curious. And so, Jmac, what are your thoughts on Kings and Onis as a matchup?
I think that this is finally the real test for the Camelot Kings, because I'm not trying to say that the Ravens or the Glads are necessarily a bad team, but that was a Ravens team that was in week 1 of just getting their new ADC and still trying to figure out how they mesh. And then that was a Gladiators team who has yet to be able to find their footing, except for their match against the Dragons, where they were able to go the full 5. But outside of that, I mean, the Gladiators have not been looking great themselves. The Ravens are starting to look better, so I think if you take that matchup, Kings versus Ravens, push that maybe another week or 2 from now, that's probably a much more interesting matchup to go on. But I think that this is finally the real test for the Camelot Kings. What do they have against what was essentially considered a top team? And I still would say that the Oni Warriors are within that realm of top 3, maybe at bare minimum top 4. So I think this is a good test for the Kings. I think it's going to come down to kind of diversifying where they can win on the map. And I think it's similar for the Oni Warriors, because Panatom and Pagon have kind of been like the guys for their hard carries, and that's not to say that Netroid or Sod haven't been stepping up. They have been, but every time that we look up, it's Panatom invading a buff or Pagon jumping into an enemy speed buff, and we're going to fight here, and we're going to win here, and that's kind of where the Oni Warriors have been playing through. It's felt kind of quiet on the sidelines a little bit for the Oni Warriors, so I'd like to see them be able to kind of change things up a little bit, see if they can get Netroid some extra farm over there, see if they can get Genetics rotating over and get him on a power pick, maybe get hit something that he can play a little bit earlier through, because right now, the state of the game is we play through early. I know it was joked about by Mike, and we bring it up every time, which was the early pressure crutch style of meta that people are playing. It's because it's working. There's a reason that game times are barely going past the 30-minute mark in most cases, is because people are playing early. They're invading buffs. We saw some games where they're sitting on enemy purple buff on 2nd, 3rd, 4th spawn, because there's just nothing that they can do about it. So getting these shield buffs, getting these cooldown buffs, invading blues and purples, that has been just the name of the meta right now, and picking picks that will allow you to do things like that. The Ola runs, the Freyas, and you wouldn't think that's saying Freya, but Freya has been building things like Bumba's Dagger to effectively be able to try and steal these jungle buffs. So I'd like to see the Warriors find ways in those side lanes to be able to play. If that mid lane, if Pagon has another sleeper performance this week, which I don't imagine he has 2 in a row like that, but if Pagon does have a bit of a sleeper, the side lanes to step up a little bit more. And then I think for me, flip side for the Camelot Kings, I'm never going to expect Captain Twig to pull out another 14-1 Lancelot game. But when Captain Twig is feeling hot on his game, play through that, because it's not very often that Twig and Variety get to look really good in a game together. Usually if one of them is suffering, the other one is. But when those two find what they want to play, when they get in the groove, that's a scary team, because we know Yark is going to be fine over on the opposite side. Quig is finally finding his home there. I'm going to get Yark fed. I'm going to let him do his thing over in that lane. I'm going to rotate over and help out BMT wherever else I can go. Now that Quig has finally been able to have some time to mesh with this team, even if it is only a couple of official sets played, I'm not going to say he's Genetics 2.0 right now, but he's starting to feel like where he was when he was on that dominant Hounds team whenever they were going toe-to-toe against the Ferryman. So now that the Kings are starting to get their groove, now have this test against the Oni Warriors, I think this is going to be a very fun set to watch for any of the fans out there, because this is the one where we really get to see the test. Do the Warriors still have it? Do the Camelot Kings actually have it? Or was it a process or a product of the opponents that they were facing?
And I think Trelli, you touch on it at the very end there, but Genetics versus old team, Quig coming in. Actually, I love how Quig, I think that's a really good point, because Quig has looked really good on the Kings the times that we got to see him, especially this last week. But I also think, Trelli, that there's a conversation of style that the teams play, right? Not just oh, hey, this team plays through mid, but early game ramp versus the late game team fighters, things like that really do change it up. And so matchup wise, this one could be interesting, because it might not even be determined by players or god choices. It might just be determined by team stylistic choices and how they play Smite.
I think momentum is important as well, just because if you think recently, the Camelot Kings duo lane has been heating up. They've been looking a lot better. They've been looking a lot stronger, more cohesive, whereas Netroid and Genetics, I think, have been, we only, again, it's just one loss for the Warriors. I don't want to touch on it too much. You asked me if I thought they were the best team in the world, and I said no, just because we just saw them at arguably their lowest, where they got one loss. They didn't look too clean. They weren't able to find too much success. It's probably going to be a small speed bump in the grand scheme of things, but when I think about how the Camelot Kings have been playing, BMT, the picture of consistency, always on point, always top of the damage charts, always on point, just popping off. Pagon had a bit of a shaky performance. We talked about the duo lane for the Kings, looking good. For the Oni Warriors, not looking so good. So if they're able to keep that momentum, going into this set, maybe that changes things. All I'm saying is, if you asked me a week ago, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, last split, Oni Warriors versus the Kings, at any point, I would have said Oni Warriors hands down. Even at this point, I'm still definitely leaning towards the Warriors, despite the fact that we just saw them at a loss. But I think if the Oni Warriors are able to shake off that one loss and just keep that momentum going, or stop that momentum in its tracks, I should say, and the Camelot Kings come in a bit shaky, we might be talking about a different matchup here. But if they have the confidence like they should have, because they've been playing super well up against these lower seeded teams, then it might be a lot more interesting.
Definitely makes things, like you said, shakier, and in region, because this matchup they're going to play each other twice because it's in region. So this is going to be the first time. Maybe it changes something for later, but we've seen how these matchups can really shift and hurt some teams positively and negatively. Very specifically as well, Leviathans beating the Warriors makes this one maybe more of a must-win for them, to make sure the ship stays right up. Because when you have a team, we've talked about it and we kind of touched on it, but when you have a team that does a 15-0 streak before losing once, and then when they lose that once, you also get 2 more months and then a roster change before you have to see them again, and then another few weeks before you see them lose again. The question is just okay, well, how do you take these losses?
Right.
And, regular season, does it weigh on you as much? Does it not weigh on you as much? How does this impact you for the future? So that one, I think, is going to be a very important one to watch. Immediately followed by another one that I think is going to be fun to watch, because we've been talking about the Styx Ferryman, who have been regarded by people in this room and admittedly a lot of players and viewers as the best team in the league now. and they're going to be taking on the Dragons, who have not been any of those things that I just said, but have been looking better. So Trelli, like, for the Dragons matchup, I guess this is more of like, what do the Dragons need to do to make this one interesting and not just a stomp from the Ferryman?
I have a big issue with the Dragons' sieges in particular because they are able to get ahead. They are able to get leads. They are the team that is dragging the games out the longest, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's when everyone else who has a 10K lead at 30 minutes can end the game, and you're pulling to 40 minutes, 38 minutes, 45 minutes to end that same game with that same gold lead, something is going wrong, right? So I have a big issue with how the Jade Dragons play around those sieges. I see a lot of little mistakes where, you know, instead of doing like a 3-2 split, they just all in on left lane, go 5 in, they get picked, they back up, they reset. Now you have to go for another EFG. That leaves room for error. And I think the Ferrymen are a team in particular where you can't make mistakes like that, especially late game where, you know, one pick and the game's over regardless. So I'm not saying the Jade Dragons can't compete. That's not what I'm saying at all. In fact,
You're just saying it took them 65 minutes against the Ravens last week.
That is exactly what I'm saying. And they had the lead. As far as I'm concerned, if you have a 10K gold lead at, you know, 30 plus minutes, you should be dominating the map. There are certain things that cannot be taken from you unless you royally mess up. So if they're able to iron out those mistakes, the Jade Dragons could beat any team in the league as far as I'm concerned, because they've shown they can get those leads. It's all about, you know, God pool comes into question. I think picks and bans is still a big deal, and just siege strength entirely. So I got to lean Ferryman for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
But that doesn't say that the Jade Dragons don't have the ability to take that matchup. It's just I need to see more from those Phoenix Sieges in particular.
Before we get too far into it, I do want to step back a moment, because I didn't pull this out of you, but like quick predictions. Do you have anything for Oni's Kings? Like, who do you think will win? We did enough talking about it, so it's just like, who's
I'll probably lean Kings on this one for the time being.
wow.
They've been looking a little bit more consistent, even in the matchups that they've had against, you know, Ravens and Glads. It hasn't really looked shaky for them. Where in the Oni Warriors, some of their losses have not looked very good.
Yeah,
they have been the opposite of good in some of theirs. So I think now that the Oni Warriors have gotten that first loss, and they even said themselves, you know, we're not going to make a streak like that. Getting this first loss is good for them. They might take another one or two before they finally figure out what's going to mesh well for them. But I think for the Kings, this is the start of the uphill for them. I'm not saying I think the Kings will go undefeated this season. I don't think that we'll have any teams go undefeated, at least for this phase. That's because I think the Kings are one of the only ones who can still do that.
Yeah.
And I think they're a great team, but I think that there's also inconsistencies on the Kings that could potentially pull one. But I think for this set, I am leaning towards the Kings.
Yeah, I think that I'm not ready to doubt the Oni Warriors off of one loss yet. I still think I lean Warriors. Probably 3-1 Warriors would be my guess, but you're right. The Kings are heating up, and the Oni Warriors did, you know, have a shaky performance. It's still about momentum for me.
Yep.
If the Kings ride that high and the Oni Warriors, you know, sulk in their loss, lick their wounds a little bit too much, we could definitely look at like a 3-2 Kings situation for sure.
Yeah, I think
we got Kings. We got Warriors.
Yep.
We got Ferrymen. Are you also feeling Ferryman for them against Dragons?
I think I am feeling Fairman for similar reasons that Trelli had. The sieging of the Dragons has been their problem since phase 1. For a moment, it looked like it was really good, and it finally had been, you know, fixed up. And then we jump into this phase, and they're still running into some of those same problems. I think drafting has also been a bit questionable by the Dragons. I don't want to harp on the Mike Mages too much, because they have been looking much better this phase than they did the previous. In fact, he got his first win on the Aphrodite, the first Aphrodite win the Jade Dragons as a team has been able to get the entire year so far. But it wasn't necessarily that they just, you know, completely dominated the map the entire time and they were winning from, you know, minute 1 until 25 minutes when they're pushing the Titan and ending that one. That was a closer game than it should have been. And then they say, okay, well, it worked out well. We're going to run it back. But the teams have already figured out how to fight against that. We spent an entire season and phase learning how to fight against Aphrodite in support role, and she's not as strong as she once was. You know, at beginning of phase 1, Aphrodite was really good. The players who were winning on it were absolutely crushing everybody on these kinds of picks. But now we know how to play her. She's also not as good. Even if some of the items around her might be getting a little bit stronger, there are other gods that can utilize it a little bit better. So I think if the Dragons can clean up drafting and clean up their sieges, they have a much better chance.
For sure.
But it's also saying that into a team like
they might be the best team in the world if they can do that.
They can clean those up. They'll be really good. I mean, they're already one of, you know, with top 8 teams in the world. But no, the problem is they're going into a Ferryman team that already have those established. They know how to end games. They know how to siege. They've got clear communications. And you never know what to expect in drafts from the Ferryman, but you know that their draft is going to be consistent. And it's usually around one player, Sino. Never what he's feeling that day. Do I want to play Surtur? Do I want to play Nike? Is Erlong Shen sound like a fun pick here? Do I want to go full tank Pele? You don't know, but you do know that his team is going to trust him on that pick, and they're going to help build around to make sure that that pick can shine where its strengths are. And I think that's where the Ferryman drafting comes in stronger than the Dragons draft. Is they're drafting what they think is strong, but maybe not necessarily what is strong as a whole, especially once we get to these late game fights.
And it's one that, I mean, again, another set that, like you said, could go 5, could go 3, right? It very much depends on how well the Dragons play. I think more than the Ferryman. I think we're going to get very consistent play from them.
I would assume so.
It's just kind of questioning what they're going to bring to the table. Speaking of questioning what they're going to bring to the table, Kings versus Leviathans, which is the actual match of the week. If you have one that you can watch, this is the one to watch and be there for. And the thing that makes it interesting, not only are these two right now, I think, both the top of their own divisions. Maybe Fairman can change that, right? Maybe the Warriors change that tomorrow as well. But the thing that comes into it is Leviathans, I believe, they've had a lot more sets to play. I think this is the only one they have to prep for. And as a bonus for them, they also get to watch the Kings play tomorrow morning before they have to prep for their set Saturday. So all of a sudden you've got a little bit more time to prepare for it. But then on top of that, the Kings have to prepare for the Warriors and the Leviathans. It's not like if you were coming in and it was Levi's and Gladiators, which I feel a little bad throwing them under the bus, but like in reality, you would prepare way more for the Leviathans than you would for the Gladiators in that kind of situation. Here you've got two top teams. And so I guess, Jmac, if you're the Kings, how much focus are you putting towards beating the Warriors? How much focus are you putting towards beating the Leviathans? And can they do both?
It's tough to do both, especially when that's your back-to-back matchup. That's not like you take Friday and then you can have Saturday to kind of sit back, VOD review, sit down and recuperate. It's immediately right back into the fire with this one. It's going to be tough. I honestly think this one might be tougher for them than the Warriors. And I think it's because so far there hasn't been a team that has really shut down Sheento. And I think that's the one that I have to call here for Leviathans is the person to be watching out for is Sheento. He has now flexed his god pool so much during the course of this year. We look back in the previous years, Sheento's playing the traditional mages. He's going to play them really well. He's going to be consistent. This year, he started stepping up a little bit more. He added things like the Kabrakan at one point, which looked good in the set that he got to play that one. And he's adding these assassins, and he's just outright beating almost everybody on these kinds of assassins. So I think for me, the biggest strength is how can BMT fare against Sheento? Can you keep Sheento locked down, but you also have to remember that adapting is back in rare form again, so you have to also keep eyes on adapting. I think this mid 2v2 is where the bulk of my emphasis on this set comes from, is how well does Twig BMT match up against adapting and Sheento? Because they both play, the junglers both play very similar, where adapting is still kind of in the, we don't really play through dual lane as much, he's getting there a bit. He plays a lot through solo, and that's where Captain Twig puts the majority of his focus, is over with Variety. Unless Variety is getting absolutely rolled in the first 5 to 6 minutes of the game, then he'll say, okay, well, let's stick over here with BMT and the dual lane and see what's going on here. I think this middle to right side, how does Variety stack up against FineOK? What are the two of them cooking that day? What do they want to try and play out here? Because FineOK is also known as one to kind of play outside the box a little bit. When everybody else is playing, when he's playing, everyone's doing a Guan Yu and Hercules meta. Here's FineOK playing Nike just because he wants to play Nike and try out this new build that he came up with a video for. So I think where the side lanes are going to be a relatively even matchup. I think that mid 2v2 is the bulk of my emphasis for which team comes out on top. I think that BMT and Sheento have had similar levels of consistency, but Sheento has had better pop-offs than BMT. And I think that there has been more consistency for adapting than there has been for Captain Twig, especially even when the Leviathans were losing, adapting was still doing well. So I think I'm leaning towards Leviathans for this one because of the strength of the core of this team.
Yeah.
But again, this is another big test for the King. This is their real test week. I said that their first set was their first real test. I think this entire weekend is really to show just how good this team can stack up against what is the current established top teams.
Trelli, thoughts on this matchup, Leviathans Kings?
Yeah, I think at the moment, if I have any confidence that there is a mid laner that is not, intimidated by like how well Sheento has been playing, it's probably BMT, just because I think he, even when his team was looking bad, was still looking good, which is it's not easy to do as a mid lane. It's especially not easy to do as a support. I think supports take the most rep when their team is losing. They're always the ones that are feeding. They're always the ones that are dying first. It makes them look bad. They get no farm, etc. But that's because they're the first line of defense, right? It's kind of this. It's similar for mid in my mind, and BMT has always been, relatively even in farm, relatively even. He doesn't die much. He always is in the right position. So I think that's something that's going for them. However, I like what Jmac said. Adapting's in rare form. That's true. He's been embarrassed a few times in some of these plays and just bounces back like it's nothing. Like, you don't have a play like what Baskin did to him or like what Panatom did to him, and then Adapting turns around in that game when he's Mercury and he gets chased all the way to Phoenix and dies, and he drops like double-digit kills and absolutely hard carries the game away, right? Like, it does not faze him in the slightest. He's been around long enough. And what do we say on the desk? He goes to the Thor. He had a terrible Thor game, missed a lot of Thor ults, the walls were off point, and then he goes right back to the Thor. And I don't remember, I think it was Frog, I'm not sure. Someone asked me, do you think Adapting should be going back to the Thor? And I said, you know what, I've learned. He has dusted just about everyone who's ever played Smite on Thor at some point in his life. Adapting has earned the right to lock in Thor whenever he wants. And what's he do that game? He absolutely pops off. He hard carries on the Thor, and it says, that's just what I'm here to do, right? He has that ability. He's earned that right. So it's not going to phase him. Even if he gets soloed, even if he misses an ult or two, he's going to be fine. Rare form is a good way to put it. I think Adapting is playing at another level right now, and he's not going to be shaken. So I definitely lean towards the Leviathans, but I still will echo a lot of what Jmac was saying about the Kings, that this is their time. If they want to have like that big win streak, if they want to heat up, this is their moment for sure.
This year is my year. I'm excited, man. That's 3 back-to-back, but at least if you're going to skip one, first off, don't
skip anything.
But then second,
come on.
You got to watch Kings Warriors, Kings Leviathans. I think that's just going to be fantastic Smite to watch. And it really does quite legitimately decide who's going to be at the top of the standings for, I think, a lot of this, right? If you win as the Kings in both sets, then suddenly we're having a conversation of like, okay, so Fairman and Kings, that's the 2 teams to look at.
Yep.
If you beat the Warriors but lose the Leviathans, then we're talking Fairman, Leviathans with a hint of Kings in there. If you lose both, I don't think much changes for us, at least. Like, all of a sudden we're saying, well, the Leviathans still looked really good. A lot of questions. Could still be that one. I could see going 5, and that could be very, very fun for everybody involved.
Yeah, long first couple of days.
Yeah, well, especially when I tell you what the next one and then the last one that we're talking about. This is not. Excuse me. This is not all of the week because there's 2 matches on Sunday that are still covered. But the last one I wanted to talk about because it just feels like 4 back to back to back to back. Ravens and Ferryman is what plays after that. Now, while Dragons Ferryman, especially after last week, is a little shaky as to how that one's going to end up unfolding, right? Could be a 3-0 for the Ferryman. Could be 3-2, but still probably favoring Ferryman. Ravens and Ferryman feels like a different kind of matchup, right? Ferryman, we've already given them a lot of praise. We talked about them earlier. They're a real good team at SMITE, as it turns out. Ravens, however, admittedly bring a bunch of ire on them by kicking Barracuda. However, with Zap, Trelli, they've looked pretty good in scenarios that they wouldn't have been able to win prior to that roster change.
I think the Ravens are playing a different version of SMITE than we have seen from them. I think they have so much room to grow.
Yeah, for sure.
But we are not in peak Ravens territory yet. Not to say we couldn't be in this week. They may have done some, got nose to the grindstone and just ended up popping off. But I'm getting the senses that it's going to take a little bit for them to get to that point. This matchup seems very Ferryman-sided to me because we haven't seen that from the Ravens yet. You know what I mean? Like, there's been times where they're like, oh, this is what their plan is, right? You know, they still try to play through Ven, which I think is fantastic. I think that's the way they should be playing 100%. Zapman has never been the hard carry on any of the teams he's been on. He doesn't want to be the hard carry. He doesn't want to be pressured. You said it yourself. He wants to die for the carries. In this case, Ven. In this case, maybe even Haddix. So that I think that's still the play style they should be going for. But it doesn't seem like they're, you know, fully ready to execute on that just yet. Doesn't mean that they can't get there. I'm excited if they do, but yeah, this one still seems. Maybe I'm just praising the Ferrymen too much because we haven't seen them that much. When we did see them, they just popped off. But think about the teams they popped off on, right? They're the ones that are looking good right now. So I'm thinking it might take a little bit longer for the Ravens to get to that point.
What I like, first off, Trelli, I feel like if I'm going to mention Chad at all, I have to mention that earlier someone did say Trelli always has great shirts.
Oh, thank you.
So that was Tiny Threat. Thanks to Tiny Threat for Trelli's great shirts.
Yep.
Or thank you for acknowledging Trelli's great shirts.
Tiny Threat did buy me this shirt.
Oh, yeah. That's Tiny Threads, or Threat. Threads? Sure. You open up a clothing store. But then someone, while you were chatting, did like immediately we got Side of Beast saying Zap's grabbing his 4th this year. And also then Devil Sama afterward, nope. And so
let me be clear, Zap could totally grab his 4th this year, and the Ravens are still not looking that great right now. Those two things could be 100% true.
Zap won all his championships from 6th place.
That's what I'm saying. So those two things can be true.
Except the Leviathans year. That was
were they, well, that's he cheated by getting onto a team that was real high up in the standings.
Yeah.
He went from being on like a 7th place team to like a 4th, 5th place team, and then that team just kept going better.
All I'm saying is both of those things could be true at the same time.
They're mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
But Jmac, how are you feeling about the Ravens' opportunities? It's still taking me a little while to get Zapman and Ravens as like a 1-to-1.
There are some players that I do the very same thing with. I think for me, this comes down to controlling the pace of the game. I think the Ferrymen are a really good team at being able to control the momentum of the game. Even in a game that they're losing, they're really good at making sure that they are able to slow things down and really bleed out the opponent's time over anything. Where if we look at the Ravens, and I'm going to harp on it because it was a pretty historic thing for us, for the first time in 3 years, we had a game breach the hour mark at 65 minutes. They walk out of that game and they go, man, why did we let them do that? They just let the Dragons continue to bleed a game out that long. And then immediately 2 games after that, pop out, like a 26 and another 26-minute style of game. Very fast-paced ones after that. And I think that the ability to bounce back from something like that and be able to take control of the wheel is great. But against the Ferrymen, this is a team that was also able to drag games out. You look back to Masters, where games in Masters are going 26 to 30 minutes before we get to the time where the pro teams are jumping in, and even with some of those pro teams, they're still going pretty quick. We get to a Ferryman's Hound game, and every single one is 40 to 45 minutes. We get to the Ferrymen and the Warriors, and the Warriors at the time were the most dominant team in the league, bar none, and they got slowed down to a 40-some-odd minute game. And the later the game goes is where it looks a little bit shakier for the Ravens compared to the Warriors. If the Ravens can control the early game and they can find their leads, they have a great opportunity to beat the Ferrymen. But the longer those games go, the more I slant at Ferrymen.
All I can imagine while you were saying that is Aurora just standing over them, like the bully holding the kid's head while he swings out. The Ravens are just like, and they just can't hit him, and Aurora's just like, no.
That night, right after I casted that set where Aurora just chased everyone on Sobek the whole time,
so funny. I
was playing ranked, and he just came into my chat and said, "Pick Sobek." I was just dying. I also know I can't do that, man.
I was just looking for Coast, and I found him. That was his exact words to me in that interview. I was like, "Why Coast?" He's like, "I was just looking for Coast," and then I found him. And I didn't let him go back.
Man, it's really fun, and especially because afterward you get to just hear from Aurora, and it is very much that where he's just like, there was a light plan, but the plan was never what ends up happening and what the plan was are not always 1-to-1 correlation. Some things feels like he manifests into the world. Also, have to throw out there that him. Mike, because they do their Travelers Proc podcast. They had Aggro on for 4 hours or something ridiculous. Maybe it was 3.5. Yeah, because I remember I was watching towards the end and they kept saying, "Sorry, Billy," and that started around the 2-hour mark. And then kept doing it but "Sorry, Billy, but one more thing." And then they'd keep singing.
Aggro did apologize on Twitter before.
Yeah.
He put out a public about and said, "Sorry, this one's going to be long. I talk a lot."
He does. but in the best ways. But this is it's going to be fun to watch. I think like what Aurora does. Him and Mike playing each other, so like a little bit of beef in their own podcast.
Yep.
Things like that I'm sure will come up again on Sunday. With pure animosity, they're going to be sitting here looking at each other, just fuming because that's exactly who both of those people are.
They're very angry individuals.
They're very angry.
Never smile.
They only hold grudges, things like that. I also want to throw this out there just because someone, Maine, mentioned it, and they said hardcore will be the new 3 times. Ooh. And so I wanted to I don't think world predictions are ever a thing you can do. More than a month and a half out, and even then,
try. You'll
try
be
doing
wrong,
it a month and a half out, you're just wrong. But the question I'm going to ask, and this will be the last question of the show: if Hardcore gets a 3rd ring, should he have to do it on yet another role to just cement himself as the best player in Smite, or does he become really like extra goated because 3 rings,
I don't
MVP, and he's done it on at least 2 roles?
Yeah, I don't think he has to do it on a 3rd role to cement himself.
I want to see him do it though.
Yeah, I think
put him in the jungle.
I think the 3rd ring he would need accolades wise, but we live in a world where that's very possible.
Yeah, I think getting that 3rd ring and being one of only 2 people who have been able to do it at that point, and your other person is Zapman. And again, not trying to be rude to Zap, but his team didn't look great at the beginning of some of those seasons.
Yeah.
And Yark has been on really good teams for both of his seasons. He has proven to be probably the more dominant player individually, no matter the role he's in. I don't think it matters what role he's in. If Yark gets a 3, he's probably the best in the world at that point.
There you go. There you have it. So that's if Yark gets it, GOAT. And I think that conversation's over all of a sudden. If anybody else gets it, that argument's going to be happening forever because people do not want to give it to Zap just because he has 3 rings. But that's going to do it for the SPL waiting room. If you're watching this live, I appreciate you for being here. If you're watching on YouTube, I appreciate you for being here. And hopefully you say only nice things in the comments. And please. And of course, if we're playing this before any games, I don't know if we will be. But if we are,
the wait is over.
Then the wait is over. The SPL will soon be beginning. But for those of you who are tuning in live, make sure you're watching tomorrow at 11 a.m. when the SPL kicks off. Catch all of those fantastic sets plus 2 more that we just talked about. Follow us, as it says down there, on Twitter at SMITEPro. It's actually on a lot of places at SMITEPro, and you'll know when the games go live and things like that. So make sure that you're hanging out. Thanks for hanging out today, and we'll see you next time on the SPL waiting room.